Right. So as our Hwang Hojun just briefed us, the leaders of South and North Korea pledged to jointly eliminate the risk of achieve complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Now, the joint statement was released during the signing of a pact between South Korean President Moon Jae-In and his North Korean counterpart Kim Jong-un, seeking to establish a permanent and solid peace on the peninsula. Let's try to read between the lines. I have two experts in this field with me in our studio here at the main press center in Goyang, 30 kilometers from Panmunjom, the very venue of the 2018 Inter-Korean Summit. Main press center where the two leaders, their wives, and their respective entourage are enjoying dinner on the southern side of the DMZ. Now, to my right, Dr. John Delury, Professor of International Studies at Yonsei University. Good to have you again here with me. And to my left, Dr. Kim Jang-ho, Dean of the Division of Language and Diplomacy at HAnkuk University of Foreign Studies. Good to have you again.
Thank you.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now let's try to decipher the joint statement that we got from the two leaders not too long after their long stroll, actually a long private talk in the woods. Now, John and I, you and I watched them sit in the woods, talk to each other for over half an hour. We saw the declaration. What caught your attention the most? Is it, first of all, impressive?
Well, it all depends on your standard. But when I look at this document, the two things that leap out, obviously, is, kind of the first thing you look for is denuclearization. I mean, I think that going into this for President Moon, that was maybe the concrete deliverable he sort of had to get. And while Kim Jong-un did not say the magic word in that sort of live briefing afterward, President Moon said it numerous times, and Kim Jong-un did not walk off the podium. But more importantly, you have it here in writing, signed by Kim Jong-un, the phrase complete denuclearization, a nuclear-free Korean Peninsula. So that is actually just one point in the declaration, but I do think given the diplomatic context and the way in which this summit is inextricably related to a second summit, that passes the bar. We had talked about this earlier. For my estimation, that passes the bar. That's more than enough to set up the next summit and move forward on that front. And then, I may stop there, but we can get into a lot of the details on everything else because it's important we don't just talk about the denuclearization issue. There's a lot in this document that is of significance.
Now, there were three agendas that the South Korean presidential office had laid out going into this summit, which were denuclearization, permanent peace of the Korean Peninsula, and improvement in inter-Korean relations. Now, were all these three agendas thoroughly touched upon in this joint statement?
Yes, they were touched upon because they are inextricably linked together. The second two mentioned has to go together with the denuclearization. What's a little bit disappointing about the actual paper we have here is, the declaration that we have is, we have one small paragraph at the end, towards the end, and it doesn't mention any degree of denuclearization, nor does it mention any method towards denuclearization. It mentions its willingness to need denuclearization, but it also doesn't mention the conditions under which it is possible. So apart from the theatrics, and I don't know how they managed to choreograph such a summit meeting at Panmunjom, which is out in nowhere, in a very small wooded area. Other than the theatrics, I think the contents was, for me, a little bit disappointing.
Now, so on denuclearization, I think the two leaders decided to leave out much of a role for U.S. President Donald Trump, would you say?
Well, yeah, I would say two things. And we talked about this earlier. We watched that 30 minutes, the walk in the woods and then the sit down.
Yes.
And we talked about we need to kind of measure the time after they return from whatever they discussed and the release of this declaration. And my quick analysis of that timing suggests to me, to your point, that there's probably more in that last number 4 than is reflected in this document. And there is kind of a third summit that's been discussed that I think we anticipate, intermediary summit, which is President Moon presumably traveling to Washington to meet directly with President Trump. And I wouldn't be surprised if there is another message based on that conversation or other conversations that will be conveyed orally. That's often a part of diplomacy. And the other point I would make is, in terms of getting specific on how denuclearization is going to happen, at the end of the day, that is a decision that can only be made with the Americans in the room at the table, And so I wouldn't expect too much more than this at this stage where you're resuming inter-Korean dialogue at the highest level. You're having a third summit. It's in there. Complete denuclearization is in there, but I wouldn't have expected more. And I would even go further than that to say, given the kind of political figure Donald Trump is, part of him might not want to see any more than that. That's his part of the deal, is to really hammer that out with Kim Jong-un. So I think, to me, this is logical in terms of, you think of the phasing of this process. This is where we would expect to be at this stage.
I think, Dr. Kim, some are worried that this is something that we have seen before, actually.
Yeah.
Complete denuclearization, the definition of that may be different for North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and, for instance, U.S. President Donald Trump. And how do we make sure that the definition of a complete denuclearization is they're on the same page in terms of the definition of those two?
To get to that question directly, as John mentioned, I was hoping prior to this summit that Kim Jong-un and our President Moon Jae-In would be able to come up with some sort of consensus on a definition of denuclearization. Because our definition, particularly the United States definition of denuclearization, is denuclearization of North Korea itself, and only North Korea. North Korea's definition of denuclearization goes much further than that. It means arms reduction, at least in Northeast Asia, if not the entire world. So I was hoping that there was some clarification on that issue. The second point is, have we seen this before? Ever since I started my studies of international relations in the 80s, I saw the end of the Cold War. Okay. I saw the 2 summit meetings with Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun, and this is, of course, the 3rd summit meeting. And the end of the Cold War gave me that sense that within a few years that we will be unified. Everyone thought so, in fact, in the 90s, early 90s. And then that sort of illusion was shattered. And then we had the meeting in 2000 and 2007. And again, it built up that sort of warm feeling and the tingle in your eyes if you're Korean, of a hopeful for unification. But unfortunately, I think this document doesn't reflect anything that's different from previous declarations, particularly going back to the definition of the denuclearization process itself. Now that North Korea has advanced even much more and further than ever before with nuclearization.
Now, John, let's you and I think we should delve further into this statement. Even other than denuclearization, there is that statement on formally ending the Korean War within this year. So we slightly touched upon this earlier today. What are we reading into that? How specific is that, and how achievable is that?
Well, this is another one of these, perennial issues that's been difficult even with an initial breakthrough like the last two summits, it is always a problem of sustainability, you know. But what I see in this document is affirmation of the previous agreements of the non-aggression agreement in 1992. And of course, in the 2000 summit, the last summit, there were very detailed discussions, preparations that were basically thrown off course by a change of government here in the South and a new government that wasn't committed to those agreements. But this is a government that inherits that legacy. They are committed to those agreements. They were involved in those agreements. And so what I see here is a kind of pragmatism of, we sort of know what we agreed on, let's do it, you know. And so you see some specificity about the DMZ, identifying, you know, the problem areas and moving forward based on previous agreements, the DMZ, how to reduce the tensions there, how to make it an actual demilitarized zone or spread that demilitarization further out. The West Sea, where there's been obviously terrible, tragic conflict between the two Koreas, where people have lost their lives. And again, a lot of work was done on that in 2007 that was thrown off course really by a political change of government here in the South. So these are some examples, resuming the military at the general level in May. You know, these are specific starting points or restarting points where I think there's political will in these two governments where they want to fast track some of that stuff and really jumpstart that. There's also some interesting reference in there to you know, a negotiating process, a peace process. I kind of like the at least three parties, a trilateral between the two Koreas and the United States, or China could be involved as well. You know, that's a very interesting rhetorical use of the or. And really what that's talking about is the transformation, the replacement of the armistice regime, which is based on a military document, the armistice agreement, with a peace regime that's based on a political settlement by the heads of state. You know, so that is language about a peace treaty negotiation or a peace accord negotiation. And that's another thing to watch, you know, what kind of traction that has. I mean, there's no question with all this stuff, this is a framework. You know, this is the opening framework. And the framework here is peace and denuclearization. It's not a new framework. The issue is implementation. And I see points where the document itself sort of grants. It's all about whether we do this or not. We've agreed to this before.
Right, that's correct.
And so the leaders themselves, they know their history. And they're trying again, and you know, and time will tell, and the devil is in the details. These cliches are true, but in my estimation, this is where I would expect them to start.
Just to add to that, this paragraph really stood out as well to me because it says during this year, which marks the 65th anniversary of the armistice, blah blah blah. Ending the armistice is not up to North and South Korea, unfortunately. It is up to China, of course, North Korea, and the United States, the UN, of course. So because we are not a signatory of the ceasefire. So in order to move from a ceasefire to a conclusion of the war and then a peace treaty, you obviously have to include China and the United States. Otherwise, the process cannot go forward with just the two Koreas themselves.
However, however, South Korea needs to be involved because we are a direct affected party, right?
Yeah. But all I'm saying is that the ceasefire has never been signed by South Korea.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I want to explore this more because this intrigues me. I'm not convinced that the signatories of the armistice agreement determine the parties to a peace treaty negotiation. If you really analyze those signatories, right, the reason we say China has to be at the table is because one of the signatories of the armistice agreement is Hwang Hojun in his capacity as general of the Chinese People's Volunteers. Well, the Chinese People's Volunteers does not exist. And Hwang Hojun was purged in 1958 and died during the Cultural Revolution in disgrace. So, and politically, the Chinese government did not sign the armistice agreement. No political representative signed the armistice agreement. It's an agreement among three militaries. Kim Il-sung signed in his capacity as a general, the commander of forces. So I see no compelling legal reason why the signatories of the armistice determine who signs a peace treaty. Now, in point of fact, when we talk in common sense terms, obviously if you want to end the Korean War, South Korea has to be at the table.
Yeah,
and you can make an argument, China should be at the table. But I don't think, but you know, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think the armistice determines the
You're
peace
entirely correct. Entirely correct. I'm not really an expert on the technicalities of the international law on this, but my feeling is that the three have to get together at least, including South Korea, of course. And the further worry is I think the United States, because yes, Donald Trump can say yes, let's sign the peace treaty. But then that has to go to the Senate and then get 2/3, not simply a majority, but a 2/3 majority to get signed.
Well, you know,
And,
go ahead.
And I'm not so sure the American senators would agree to that because of the humanitarian reasons, because of their criticism of their own president giving up too much before CVID.
Right, and this is very interesting. I have the tweet, but I think President Trump tweeted something like, "We're ending the Korean War," you know, moments ago. And you raise a very important point, you know, in terms of a peace treaty from a U.S. legal perspective, as you say, that would have to go through ratification by the Senate, a very high bar. And there's kind of pros and cons. You know, one route would be you don't call it a peace treaty. Right? The parties agree to a peace accord. And that's enough of a political decision. And you specifically, because again, legally, Congress never declared war. The U.S. participation in the Korean War
through United Nations
was through the United Nations, a so-called police action. So Congress does not necessarily have to end a war that it never authorized in the first place. You know. So now the downside of that is one problem in this whole process is if it's narrowly based on Donald Trump's calculation, this is a good idea, then it could be a problem in the long run. You know, so it's a much more durable agreement. If it goes through that whole process of Senate ratification, then it's something that everyone can agree would be sustained. Absolutely.
I mean, I've consulted my friends in international law many times, various ones, and they all have different views. And I think many do say that not necessarily do we need the signatories of the ceasefire to sign a peace treaty, but then in some sense you would actually need multiple parties for binding purposes, you know.
Yeah, and I think we all agree. It's just common sense at minimum. You're not going to end the Korean War if North Korea, South Korea, and the United States don't agree. And then there's another
any one of us.
Right, absolutely. Those are the three essential parties. China has interests and Japan has interests that need to be included.
Now, there's also, this is also something that we had anticipated would be included in the statement. I don't know whether it's strong enough, holding reunions for families. South Korea have gone for making this a regular event. I don't think that the statement goes as far as that, but at least they're going for the August 15th Liberation Day for Korea. So they will hold another reunion for separated families. They have decided to establish a joint liaison office in Kaesong, I believe. They have agreed to. So these are, I suppose, more communication between the two Koreas. So improvement in inter-Korean relations. They've agreed to stop those propaganda loudspeakers where, you know, South Korea blasts its K-pop girl group music.
Which we now know Kim Jong-un actually likes.
Yes, that's correct. Now, so Red Velvet.
At least.
Yes. What do these mean? Are they significant, would you say?
I think this is significant in that they have done every single thing that the two parties can do, including reunion of separate families, establishing a permanent base of communication, the West Sea issue, trying to turn that into a more neutral area, doing something with the DMZ, making a peace sort of environment. Other than the actual two things we talked about, the denuclearization and the peace treaty. This paper, this declaration contains every single thing that those two leaders could possibly have agreed on. In that way, I think it's significant. It's more, because it's more comprehensive than 2007 or 2000.
And to add to that a little, I mean, you kind of look into the weeds of this document on the West Sea. You know, it strikes me, just including the phrase northern limit line, the North Koreans won't necessarily, they don't recognize the northern limit line. They can make a big stink out of that, right? And so when you see that phrase, it's just there in a neutral way. It's not recognized legitimately, but what it means is some flexibility on the North Korean side.
Sure.
They could have easily objected and say, no way NLL is in there, right? So again, this gives us hints of the degree of flexibility on both sides and willingness, you know, to be more open. Now, two things I don't see in there that strike me. Kaesong industrial complex is not mentioned, and Kumgangsan is not mentioned.
Sure.
You know, and actually, I would say in general, one thing that's not in here, there's a couple, you know, genteel nods to economic cooperation, co-prosperity, balanced growth, language we've seen before. But this is very light, as anticipated. This is very light on economic development. It looks very careful about sanctions, you know, and so I see a measure of restraint, especially on that side, that they're being cautious, that the Moon government was cautious. And again, the North Koreans didn't push back on that. You know, they didn't make a huff and say, well, if you don't talk about that, then it's all off, you know. And so that's another way to read this
right. I mean, from the working level discussions that went on between the two Koreas leading up to the summit, I think there was a strong understanding between the two Koreas that economic cooperation will not be discussed at all for the summit because of this hardline sanctions campaign.
It's basically President Donald Trump. It's accommodating because our government, as well as the United States, as well as the international community, feels that this pressure, all-out sanction on North Korea had quite a lot to do with this conclusion. And Kaesong and Kumgang, unfortunately, is a direct violation of those resolutions. So I think this was let's not go there from the very beginning in the first place.
So I suppose basically the key point is we have this beautifully languaged statement. How do we make sure that this is implemented?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I agree. It's beautiful language. I think it's actually. I mean, there's not a lot of
diplomatically.
Yeah, to me, it's actually a more straightforward document. It's a more of a. We've already agreed to this stuff, you know, and now let's do it. But to answer your question, the document itself can't tell us about the implementation of the document, you know, and this is where we have to look at words in the context of things and deeds. And so the test of this document, I think we would all agree, comes in the weeks and the months and ultimately the years to come. They've given us some dates that we can test the document by, you know. Do the generals meet by May? Do you have the reunions in August? And even better, is it sustained? Is that something that's regularized, you know? So they've set out. And there's a lot of language in here about practical scheme to do this and concrete steps to do that. But the test of the document comes next, you know, whether they act on it or not. And we all share this skepticism. I think the North Koreans also are skeptical. We agree to stuff and then it falls apart, you know. And so what I sense in this is they want to do this again. They have political will to do it, but the test is yet to come.
I agree entirely with Professor Delury. But one thing that is different from the other two summit is the theatrics, if you will, but the willingness of Kim Jong-un to show his face, not only at the summit, but during that 30-minute private talk with President Moon, his willingness to come forward in the reading of the declaration, which his father or Kim Il-sung would not have even contemplated. So he's sort of coming out onto the world scene and saying that, look, I'm here, I'm saying this, okay? I'll try my hardest to keep on, you know, what I've said I'm going to do. And that's entirely different from his father and his grandfather.
I think that's a really key point. That's an excellent point. I mean, you think about Kim Jong-il, we've got kind of one tape of him where you hear his voice speaking just to North Koreans. Now we've heard Kim Jong-un sitting in this press center. We heard him live, basically speaking to the world. You know, so that is okay. You can say that's stylistic, but you know, the substance in that style, and it means the possibilities of working with him. He brings his wife, and you see that you see the First Lady of North Korea speaking openly in front of all the cameras, chit-chatting, you know, with President Moon and the First Lady of the South. I mean, that does open certain doors that I think were closed before, and we at least need to test that, you know, and not give into our fatalism too quickly. Yeah,
I think it's a newly found confidence that the North Korean regime has, be it the nuclear weapons, or be it their theatrics because they're desperate. It seems to me Kim Il-jung before, during the Winter Olympics, Kim Jong-un today, with his wife especially, they seem to ooze confidence, which no other North Korean leaders had before, or I've seen.
I'm just going to give a notice to our viewers that we will be getting live feed of the South Korea's first couple seeing off North Korea's first couple any minute now. So when we do get the live footages, we're going to toss it over to Panmunjom, and you will see the live feed. So we don't know when it will be cut off. So just giving you a heads up. When we do, we'll have to say goodbye to John Delury and Dr. Kim Jang-ho. So that's what we'll be doing. But before that, so South Korean President Moon Jae-in is traveling to Pyongyang this fall. That was in the joint declaration. And Donald Trump, of course, he tweeted afterwards saying, after a furious year of missile launches and nuclear testing, a historic meeting between North and South Korea is taking place. Good things are taking place, but only time will tell.
Yeah. He'll go to Pyongyang in the fall if the talks in May or June with the U.S. president goes well. If everything breaks off then who knows what will happen. Like you said, only time will tell.
So we have a series of summits after this. So South Korea-U.S. summit will happen mid-May, and hopefully successful North Korea-U.S. summit will happen end of May, early June, and then hopefully President Moon, excuse me.
You've been talking all day.
Yeah.
I'll jump in. There could be other summits as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
I could see Kim Jong-un popping off to Vladivostok to meet Vladimir Putin any weekend. Abe Shinzo looks nervous about being cut out of all this talking. And, you know, that's another piece, maybe not soon, but could also come into play.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is another remarkable thing about how the region has changed.
Yeah.
Last year, it was all threats. It was missile tests and nuclear tests. Right now, we're in an extraordinary period of summitry for East Asia, where there's a lot of talking going on. You know, it's a huge test of these leaders. They're taking a lot of political risks to engage in these tests, like in these talks. As you said, Kim Jong-un, what we saw of him today, President Trump is also putting a lot on the line, as is Kim Jong-un, when they go into that meeting. So this is, you know, this is kind of high-wire diplomacy, high-stakes diplomacy. I think it appeals especially to Donald Trump and to Kim Jong-un. You know, I think they are ambitious, high-risk, high-reward type of players. Moon Jae-in is maybe more of a stabilizing force in all of that. But yeah, we're seeing a remarkable uptick in diplomacy in the region.
You know, something interesting, John, would you say 24 hours ago, Trump was saying, you know, not 24 hours ago, he was saying he could not go to the summit meeting with North Korea to meet Kim Jong-un. He could respectfully leave the meeting. I don't know how you could do that respectfully. But would you say from 24 hours ago to now, would you say the possibility of that summit meeting happening, has it increased or decreased?
It's increased, although even that statement that Donald Trump made, to me that was typical Trump.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't want to pre-commit too much because he, you know, it's leverage. I think it's his style of negotiating that you keep the other side a little on edge. The North Koreans do that all the time as well, so they perfectly understand the posturing. But I've seen pretty consistent signs from the moment that the National Security Advisor and the intelligence chief, you know, flew over to Washington, gave that message. Donald Trump said, "I'll take that meeting." You know, it's on his book, and now they're working out all the logistics. Something could have gone terribly wrong today, right? Really off, and that could have thrown a Trump-Kim summit into doubt. But nothing like that happened. I mean, in your earlier analysis, you made a good critique by your bar. This was not enough. You'd like to see a lot more for complete denuclearization. But I think it's enough for Donald Trump. And again, he wants to have that negotiation, you know. And so I think his tweets already suggest to us it's full steam ahead, you know, as far as the Trump administration is concerned.
Because when I was driving over here just an hour ago, I was tuned into BBC as well, CNN, and they were very skeptical because there was nothing here that says what is denuclearization. And the anchor said that if it was 50-50 before,